The core at the problematic in couples is the bringing of unresolved childhood issues into the relationship without knowing you're doing it. And the way we know that is that if you have the same issue 3 times in a row, it comes from the past. Because repetition is an indication of the presence of the past in the present. So that's where the challenge to difference comes from, because that childhood issue has made it difficult for you to actually be with and hear and relate to other people as they are in themselves. You relate to them as you need them to be, as you wish they were, and consequently you merge with them. And so then they differentiate, and then that triggers your anxiety because now you're talking to somebody different from the one you thought they were. But the issue lies in childhood. The problem shows up in adulthood as objection to difference. And the movement through that, then through the dialogue process, is to connect beyond and through difference. I think in a summary, that would be basically the summary of the Imago process. Yeah.
And what's so exciting about living with Harville is he'll say something like that. You could write volumes about childhood issues. But Harville will go, everyone's parents, it's one of 2 things. They were either intrusive or they were neglectful. They were either telling you what to do all the time or they just weren't there. And what was your parent experience like? And then the person begins to crystallize something that before took maybe 6 months or a year of therapy to go, now how do I really feel about my parents? Mm-hmm. And of course, everyone had both. Everyone had some people in their life that was intrusive and some that were neglectful, but one was more painful than the other. So we just quickly get everyone in the room to identify how it was in childhood that was painful for them and invite them to consider how they've recreated the situation. They chose a partner who also now probably treats them the same way, and their job is now to help heal that childhood wound together.
Yeah, and it turns out that it's really very simple. When a parent who's neglectful is not present to the child, parent who is intrusive is not present to the child. They're just present to the parent's need to be that way. So the child experiences the caretaker as present but absent. Present in body, absent in terms of connection. We used to be very complicated about you have to be the parent, you have to be as a partner what your partner's parents were not, so that they can get in the relationship what they didn't get with their caretakers. And so we went through a lot of stuff. But as we kept refining the theory, what we discovered was everybody simply wants presence. And it's not complicated. It's just that the dialogue process is, I have to listen to you to mirror you accurately, and you experience me being present when I'm listening and mirroring, which means your unconscious, your lower brain, where the memory of the absent parent is now being changed by experiencing in the present my being present to you while you're talking. So we once thought it was complicated, but it actually became the side effect of the dialogue process itself, that addressed the childhood wound for everybody, because everybody who has a childhood wound, the wound is around an absent parent. Either they died or they were present in body but absent. They were yelling, that means they're absent. They're not present to the child. They're present to the parent's needs. Am I making sense? So it turns out it's really very simple. So when you say, make eye contact, take a deep breath, turn off your movie, be present to your partner while your partner talks.
My movie.
And the partner, well, you can run your movie because you're the one talking. Yeah. So you're running your movie. And I'm saying, so what I see in your movie is, and is that, did I get that? Well, when I say, did I get that? Her brain says, oh, he's interested. And then I'll say, did I get it right? And she'll say, well, not quite, but I said, well, tell me what I didn't get right again. And she'll tell me, and then I'll say, did I get it now? And something's happening. The pleasure centers of her brain are being activated. Some endorphins are being released. I'm holding her hand, so some oxytocin is being exchanged. And then I'll say, is there more about that? Is there more about that? And when I say, is there more about that, that really releases more endorphins and more oxytocin if we're touching. And what you're experiencing now is what you didn't get in childhood. And as you're experiencing that, and we're neurochemically bonding, we're creating a relationship that repairs the injury that both of us had with our caretakers in childhood. Now, the fascinating thing is when I'm present to Helen while she's talking, I also am present to me, because I can't run my movie, which would be a distraction even to my being present to her while she's talking, so that I benefit from not being in my negative psychological space while she's talking, even if she's in a negative psychological space. That just moving, it's sort of like mindfulness. You move out of your own processing, but the way we do mindfulness is my focus is on your talking rather than on my, whatever arises in my psyche. It's whatever comes up for you, and I mirror that. So that mindfully present to Helen heals her childhood wound. We do that to each other and for each other, that we then become the co-healers of each other through a very simple process of having a conversation in which we don't polarize.
And what is so special when Harville will talk to me that way is he's asking me if he understood me correctly and asks me if there's more. And I'm used to people, when I talk, they either judge me as right or wrong, but he seems curious about me. Curious, yeah. And like he's beginning to wonder about me and wonder about why I think the thoughts I have, why I feel the way I do. And suddenly I have someone in my life who's wondering about me. And we've recently, in the last few years, done study on the phenomenon of wonder, and wrote a paper. No one else in the mental health field has written a paper on wonder. And but the neuroscientists say that wondering puts you into the part of your brain where you're integrating the whole brain and tolerating ambiguity, and that's a sign of brain health. A couple wonders about each other's difference, and instead of staying critical of it. And when they do wonder, they discover a whole new universe inside their brain.
I.e. the other person.
A whole new world.
The world of your partner. And that's the fascinating thing. Initially, when you begin discovering your partner doesn't live in your world, it's so scary, because now, like, what am I going to do? It's unfamiliar. And then once you get through the anxiety and go through curiosity and wonder, you realize that you have now been invited into a whole different universe, where Helen, her taste buds are different from mine, the way she sleeps is different from my sleep, what she likes to eat is different, where she likes to go. Everything is different. So that ceases to be threatening to me, it becomes joyful for me, because I'm getting to explore. So when we go to a museum, or we go on a trip, or we do whatever, Helen's reporting about how this is for me gives me two perspectives, mine and hers at the same time, and I don't have to say, what do you mean? Instead, I'm saying, tell me more about that. And that's it looks simple, but it's a paradigm shift of being available to, responsive to, and mutual accepting of each other, rather than the constant need to pick at each other and judge each other and wonder, why do you like hot dogs? You know, that's a put down. But if you like hot dogs, tell me about hot dogs.
And all this we think of as couplehood as a spiritual path.
Yeah.
Because when you practice this together, you slow your own thinking process down, And when you're marrying your partner, it's almost like your partner's words can become a mantra. Like you stop your monkey brain. The spiritual gurus say that we all have that monkey chatter. And some people, spend $3,000 going to India to spend a month on the mountaintop with the guru, and they pay the guru, and all that to slow their brain down and get a feeling that connects them with the ultimate. But we think that's actually achievable in your relationship. If you learn to really slow down and discover the whole new universe inside your partner.
Yeah, the point of focus is always available in your partner's experience, and the release of your self-preoccupation always potential by listening to that experience. So I think what we'd have to add that also makes this work, and couple it just occurred to me we should say this, is that all of this means that you have made a pact to eliminate negativity from your relationship. So we call it a zero negativity process. And negativity, we define it very simply, it's a put down. And a simple put down is, you gotta be kidding. That's a simple put down. A horrible put down is, that's terrible and you should feel awful about that, and you go into shame, blame, and criticism. But even just a glare at your partner or an eye roll means you're not okay like you are. But she is okay like she is. That's just my problem. But we have to remove negativity, because any negative signal, mild or intense, triggers the amygdala, turns on cortisol, sets up the defenses, puts a wall between us. And now it's like, what happened? I just said what? or where did you get that idea? Well, your tone.
What?
Yeah. But and she says, well,
What's wrong with that?
Your tone of voice. What do you mean by my tone of voice? And so then you start making it worse, because every time I escalate my tone of voice, more cortisol is generated. The more she becomes, becomes wary of him. So what we have to do is remove that as by commitment. We remove that from our transactions. But we discovered that doesn't quite do it. You have to also add affirmations. And affirmations can be anything that says to you, you are okay as you are, and I accept you as you are. In fact, I value you, I appreciate you, I admire you, I adore you, I've got your back, and so forth. That anything that does that. So it could be, I appreciate you for bringing me a cup of coffee, or I appreciate the way you're looking at me. Anything that says, I like you, I want to be with you, it's okay for us to be together, it's one of the things I like, means that her brain is saying, I'm not going to be killed by this person, because the brain is only interested in, I'm going to live or die here. And it doesn't have any gray shades of gray. It's like live or die. But if it says I'm going to live here, then it can start playing with me, and I play with her. And our brains then begin to produce endorphins. And if we get really giggly and go to belly laughing, and it'll produce some dopamine. And then we're really high on our own neurochemistry. And the more we get high on our own neurochemistry, the more we like each other. And the more we like each other, the more bonded we feel. Then the more time we want to spend together. And then we wonder, why do we have to work so hard? Because when we're working hard, we don't get to be together. So now we work together all the time. So we're together all the time. And that makes life really an odyssey of joy.